I'm Samantha, 32, and I used to believe family meant unconditional love. That illusion shattered last Thanksgiving at our annual reunion dinner. My brother Ryan's smirk as he pointed to a fold-out chair by the trash can still burns in my memory. "Sorry, this table's for family only," he announced, causing everyone to laugh while my cheeks flushed hot with humiliation. I never imagined I'd find vindication in a $2,900 bill. Before I continue this painful memory, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family. Trust me, what happened next changed everything. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, Ryan and I were actually close. Just 15 months apart, we built blanket forts, rode bikes through neighborhood trails, and defended each other from playground bullies. Our childhood photos show us with matching gap-toothed grins and skinned knees, arms slung around each other's shoulders. Everything changed when Ryan turned 13. Suddenly, he was the golden child, the son who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. His B- grades earned celebratory dinners, while my straight A's warranted nothing more than a distracted good job. When he made the junior varsity basketball team, Dad installed a premium hoop system in our driveway. When I became debate team captain and qualified for nationals, Mom couldn't attend because it conflicted with Ryan's regular season game. "Your brother needs more support," Mom would explain with that placating smile. "You're so self-sufficient, Samantha." Self-sufficient became code for invisible. I buried myself in academics, graduated valedictorian, and earned a full scholarship to Cornell while Ryan barely scraped into our state university after Dad called in a favor. Even then, my achievement was diminished. "It's wonderful you won't burden us with tuition," Mom said, as if my accomplishment was merely financial convenience. I built my life away from home after that, visiting only for obligatory holidays. I earned my MBA, secured a marketing director position at a respected firm, and married Daniel, who seemed to understand my worth in ways my family never did. Meanwhile, Ryan dropped out of college twice before completing a business degree with mediocre grades. Yet Mom and Dad bankrolled his first failed startup, then helped him secure a position at my father's friend's company. The preferential treatment never stopped. When Ryan married Vanessa 5 years ago, my parents spent over $100,000 on their wedding. My wedding gift had been a check for $5,000 and Mom's complaint that my venue choice was impractically far for relatives. It was 45 minutes from their home. Vanessa came from money and expected to marry into more. Her father owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across 3 states. She wore designer clothes exclusively and viewed my career accomplishments with thinly veiled disdain. "How nice that you work," she'd say, as if my executive position were a quirky hobby. Meanwhile, my marriage to Daniel had been deteriorating. His gambling addiction surfaced slowly, first small sports bets, then larger ones, then secret credit cards. I tried therapy, intervention, everything to save us, but eventually filed for divorce when I discovered he'd mortgaged our home without my knowledge. The divorce finalized 6 months before that fateful family dinner, leaving me temporarily financially strained as I rebuilt my savings and credit. I downsized to a modest apartment and was driving a used Honda instead of my former Audi. My family's response to my divorce was remarkably unsupportive. Mom suggested I should have tried harder, while Dad wondered aloud if I'd emasculated Daniel with my career focus. Ryan was the worst, making snide comments about my failure and suggesting Daniel left because I was too difficult. Only my elderly grandmother called regularly to check on me, sending small care packages and words of encouragement. Despite everything, I still yearned for family connection. When Mom called about the annual reunion dinner at the Ivory Room, an upscale restaurant downtown, I agreed to attend. "Everyone will be there," she promised. "It'll be good for you to get out. Maybe wear something nice?" First impressions after a divorce matter. The night before the dinner, Mom called again. "We're so excited to see you tomorrow," she said. though her tone conveyed obligation rather than enthusiasm. "Everything will be fine, sweetie. Just be pleasant and don't bring up any unpleasantness about the divorce. No one wants to hear sad stories." I spent hours preparing for that dinner, selecting a black cocktail dress that struck the perfect balance between elegant and understated. I couldn't afford new shoes, so I polished my old heels until they gleamed. I applied my makeup carefully, practiced my smile in the mirror, and rehearsed neutral conversation topics. Looking at my reflection, I whispered affirmations. "You belong. You are worthy. This is your family, too." How naive I was, believing I could simply dress the part and be welcomed back into the fold. I had no idea what humiliation waited for me at the ivory room, or how that night would finally force me to see my family for who they truly were. The ivory room wasn't just a restaurant, it was a statement. Nestled in the city's financial district, it occupied the penthouse floor of a glass skyscraper with panoramic views of the skyline. Michelin-starred and notoriously difficult to book, it featured 20-foot ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and tables spaced far enough apart to create the illusion that each dining party existed in their own private universe. The waitstaff moved with balletic precision, wearing tailored black suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. While my family arrived in a procession of luxury vehicles, Dad's Mercedes, Ryan and Vanessa's Range Rover, Uncle Phil's Jaguar, I stepped out of an Uber, immediately feeling the disparity. The valet's expression shifted subtly when I didn't hand him keys to park, his practiced smile tightening at the corners. I smoothed my dress, took a deep breath, and entered the lobby. The elevator attendant wore white gloves and stood rigidly at attention. "Floor, ma'am?" he asked. "The ivory room, please," I replied, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. The Keller party?" he inquired, consulting his list. I nodded, surprised he knew. "Your family has already arrived." Something in his tone, pity, perhaps, should have warned me. The restaurant entrance featured a dramatic archway lined with actual ivory, grandfathered in before the ban, according to the plaque. A hostess with an immaculate chignon greeted me with practiced warmth. "I'm with the Keller party," I said. Her smile faltered for a microsecond as she consulted her tablet. "Of course. Follow me, please." I spotted my family before she led me to them. They occupied the largest table in the center of the restaurant, positioned directly beneath the main chandelier. 12 people were already seated, champagne flutes in hand, engaged in animated conversation. Mom saw me first. She half rose from her chair, waving with fluttering fingers. "Samantha, you made it." Her greeting silenced the table. All eyes turned to me, expressions ranging from Dad's uncomfortable nod to Ryan's unmistakable scowl. Vanessa whispered something to my brother that made him smirk. "You remember everyone, of course," Mom said, gesturing vaguely around the table instead of proper introductions. I did remember everyone. Uncle Phil, Dad's brother, a banking executive with perpetually sunburned skin from golfing, his wife Aunt Margaret, who collected designer handbags and gossip with equal enthusiasm, their children Emma and Jake, cousins close to my age who had always been pleasant if somewhat distant, Ryan's in-laws, the Prestons, who radiated old money confidence, and a couple of family friends whose inclusion emphasized my exclusion. "Samantha," Dad acknowledged finally, not bothering to stand. "You found the place all right?" "The Uber app has maps," I replied with forced lightness, attempting humor. No one laughed. Aunt Margaret's eyebrows rose. "Uber? Is your car in the shop, dear?" Before I could answer, Uncle Phil chimed in. "Heard about the divorce. Tough break. Daniel seemed like a solid guy. He stole money from me and gambled away our savings," I stated flatly. An uncomfortable silence followed, broken by Mom's nervous laughter. "Samantha has always had a flair for the dramatic. Let's not dwell on unpleasantness." I scanned the table, noticing every seat was filled. "Where should I?" I began. That's when Ryan spoke up, rising slightly from his chair. His voice carried across the restaurant as he pointed toward the service station near the kitchen doors. "Sorry, this table's for family only," he smirked, indicating a fold-out chair positioned beside a discreet trash receptacle. "We had to make arrangements for one more." The implications were clear. I wasn't really family anymore. I was an afterthought, an obligation, someone to be seated by the garbage. Cousin Emma looked down at her plate, a flush creeping up her neck. Jake studied his water glass intently. No one objected. No one defended me. "We would have included you at the main table," Vanessa added with artificial sweetness, "but the restaurant has such strict seating arrangements. Fire codes and all that." It was a blatant lie. I could see at least 3 empty places at nearby tables. The ivory room could easily have accommodated one more chair. Mom's expression was pained but resigned. "It's just for dinner, sweetie." The staff needed somewhere to put the extra place setting. Dad didn't even look up from his menu. With as much dignity as I could muster, I walked to the fold-out chair. The server assigned to that section, not the main table's dedicated team, gave me a sympathetic look as he hastily set a place for me with mismatched silverware. "I'm Michael," he whispered. "I'll take good care of you." From my isolated position, I could see my family, but couldn't properly hear their conversations without straining. I was physically present, but functionally excluded, exactly as Ryan had intended. Aunt Margaret's voice carried occasionally. "How's the new country club membership, Ryan? Worth the initiation fee?" Uncle Phil boomed. "Those sailing lessons are paying off. Vanessa's father says you're a natural." Mom's laugh tinkled like breaking glass when Mr. Preston told some anecdote about their recent trip to the Maldives. Meanwhile, servers navigated around my awkwardly placed chair, one nearly tripping over my purse. The trash can emitted a faint but persistent odor of food waste. A busboy apologized 3 times when he needed to access the service station behind me. I sat straight-backed, smiling pleasantly whenever anyone glanced my way, determined not to show how deeply their cruelty cut. Inside, though, a familiar childhood feeling expanded, the sensation of being invisible in plain sight, of being tolerated rather than wanted. Cousin Jake caught my eye once and mouthed sorry when no one was looking. It was the only acknowledgement of the situation's inappropriateness, and while I appreciated the gesture, his failure to speak up only underscored my isolation. I was no longer the successful marketing executive who had built campaigns for multinational corporations. In that moment, I was 8 years old again, watching from the sidelines as my family celebrated Ryan's accomplishments while mine gathered dust. "We've pre-ordered appetizers for the table," Ryan announced loudly as servers appeared with trays of delicacies. "The chef's doing a special selection for us tonight." The main table erupted in appreciative murmurs as elaborate plates were set before each person. Tiny towers of seafood, foie gras with gold leaf, and caviar nestled on mother-of-pearl spoons. My table, if you could call a TV tray wedged between service stations a table, remained conspicuously empty. Michael, my server, approached with an apologetic expression. "The appetizers were ordered for the main party only," he explained quietly. "Can I get you something to start?" Before I could answer, Ryan's voice cut across the space. "Don't worry about Samantha. She's watching her budget these days." He turned to the table with a theatrical whisper. "Divorce settlements, you know." Laughter rippled through the group. Even Dad chuckled. "I'll have the roasted beet salad," I told Michael, choosing one of the least expensive appetizers. My cheeks burned as I added, "And water is fine for now." Aunt Margaret's voice carried clearly. "Remember when Samantha went through that vegetarian phase in high school? So much drama over Thanksgiving turkey. She was always finding ways to make herself the center of attention," Ryan agreed, loud enough for me to hear. The memory they referenced was completely distorted. I developed a severe alpha-gal allergy after a tick bite, making red meat consumption dangerous. My drama had been an actual medical emergency when they'd secretly added beef broth to the gravy, sending me to the ER with anaphylaxis. I took a slow sip of water, willing my hands not to shake. This wasn't just casual family teasing. This was calculated humiliation. Ryan was systematically dismantling any dignity I had left, and our family was not only allowing it, but actively participating. The physical separation made it worse. Had I been at the main table, I might have defended myself or changed the subject. Isolated by the trash can, I was literally sidelined in the conversation about my own life. When my beet salad arrived, noticeably smaller than the lavish appetizers at the main table, Uncle Phil called out, "Samantha, come take a family photo before we dig in." For a moment, hope fluttered in my chest. They did want to include me. I stood, smoothing my dress, only to have Phil hand me his iPhone. "Get one of all of us, will you? Make sure you get the chandelier in the frame." I was the photographer, not a subject. Not family. With mechanical politeness, I took several photos, careful to capture everyone's smiling faces beneath the glittering chandelier. No one suggested taking another with me included. When I returned to my fold-out chair, my salad had been moved aside by a busboy accessing the service station. The vinaigrette had soaked through the greens, making them wilt unappetizingly. "Should I bring you a fresh one?" Michael asked, noticing my expression. "No, it's fine," I replied, not wanting to call more attention to myself. From the main table, I caught snippets of conversation. The Aspen property is finally being renovated. The private school has a 2-year waiting list, but the headmaster is a golf buddy. Our financial advisor suggests offshore accounts given the current climate. Topics were carefully selected to emphasize wealth, connections, and exclusivity, 3 things my recent divorce had temporarily diminished in my life. I had no doubt this was intentional. When Ryan mentioned his recent promotion at work, my stomach clenched. He'd been struggling at his position until I recommended him for a special project with my company's partner firm. I'd called in personal favors, vouched for his capabilities, and mentored him through the presentation that ultimately led to his advancement. Now he was acting as though it had been inevitable due to his natural talents. "Always knew you'd outpace everyone," Dad said proudly, clapping Ryan on the shoulder. "Executive track before 40. That's the colorway." I was 32 and had made executive level at 30, but apparently that didn't count as the colorway. A server dropped a utensil near my chair, and as he apologized and bent to retrieve it, he accidentally jostled my water glass, sending ice water into my lap. I gasped at the cold shock, jumping up as water dripped from my carefully chosen dress. From the main table, laughter erupted. "Some things never change," Ryan called out. "Remember how clumsy she was at my wedding? Nearly took out the cake with that stumble." Another distortion. I'd been pushed by one of Ryan's drunk college friends, barely catching myself before hitting the cake table. Somehow, in family lore, this had become my fault. "Bathrooms that way," Vanessa pointed, not bothering to hide her amusement at my predicament. In the opulent bathroom, I blotted my dress with paper towels, fighting back tears that threatened to ruin my carefully applied makeup. The bathroom attendant offered a sympathetic smile and a linen hand towel that worked better than paper. "Family dinners can be rough," she commented gently. "Is it that obvious?" I asked. "Honey, I've worked here 15 years. I've seen every kind of family drama play out over expensive wine." She handed me a travel-sized stain remover. "This might help with the watermarks." When I returned, the main courses had arrived. The main table was a showcase of culinary extravagance: 45-day dry-aged steaks, whole lobsters, handmade pasta with truffles shaved tableside. At my little station, Michael waited with a simple chicken dish I hadn't ordered. "Your brother took the liberty of ordering for you," he explained apologetically. "He mentioned dietary restrictions?" I had no dietary restrictions beyond the alpha-gal allergy I'd outgrown years ago. Ryan had deliberately chosen the most basic, uninspired dish on the menu, the culinary equivalent of the fold-out chair I sat on. "Thank you," I told Michael, not having the energy to object. As I cut into the overcooked chicken, I caught Cousin Emma watching me with an unreadable expression. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away, but not before I recognized something in her face. Perhaps guilt, perhaps recognition. Whatever connection might have formed was severed when Vanessa demanded Emma's attention with a question about her recent Caribbean cruise. The dinner continued this way, a masterclass in subtle cruelty disguised as family togetherness. I was physically present, but systematically excluded from every meaningful interaction. When dessert menus were distributed, none came my way. When coffee orders were taken, my section was skipped entirely. Through it all, I maintained a neutral expression, refusing to give Ryan the satisfaction of seeing me break. But inside, something was shifting. The hurt was crystallizing into clarity, and with it came a resolve I hadn't felt in years. I didn't deserve this treatment. No one did. I was so lost in this realization that I almost missed Ryan's next announcement, the one that would change everything. "Let's order some proper wine," Ryan declared, summoning the sommelier with a casual wave. "The occasion demands it." The sommelier, a poised woman with an impressive taste-fin medallion, appeared instantly at the main table. Ryan barely glanced at the wine list before pointing to a selection. "We'll start with 2 bottles of the Chateau Margaux 2010. My breath caught. Even with my limited wine knowledge, I recognized that vintage, easily $300 per bottle. "Excellent choice, sir," the sommelier approved with a deferential nod. Dad looked momentarily concerned. "That's quite a splurge, son." Ryan laughed, clapping Dad on the shoulder. "Tonight's special. We're celebrating, remember." "Celebrating what?" I wondered, but remained silent at my isolated station. The sommelier returned with the bottles, performing the tasting ritual with flourish. After Ryan's approval, she poured generous servings for everyone at the main table. She glanced questioningly toward me, but Vanessa smoothly interjected, "Oh, don't worry about over there. She's driving tonight." I wasn't driving. I'd taken an Uber specifically so I could drink if I wanted to, but the lie served its purpose. No expensive wine for the outcast. Michael, noticing the interaction, quietly brought me a glass of house red. On me, he whispered with a conspiratorial wink. The exclusion continued as the family ordered their main courses. Uncle Phil selected a seafood tower. For the table, a magnificent 3-tiered display of lobster, king crab, oysters, and jumbo shrimp that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Ryan and Dad both ordered the dry-aged tomahawk steaks with truffle butter. Vanessa chose the imported Dover sole, prepared tableside with theatrical flair. When it came time for my order, Ryan loudly suggested, perhaps something from the children's menu for Samantha. Given the circumstances, the server looked mortified on my behalf. I calmly ordered the roasted chicken, mid-range in price and dignity. "Smart choice," Aunt Margaret commented. "Simple food is so much better when you're going through emotional turmoil." The conversation shifted to an upcoming family vacation to Bora Bora. Plans were discussed in elaborate detail: private bungalows over crystal waters, scuba excursions, personal chefs. Not once was I acknowledged, though everyone at the table knew I wasn't invited. "We should coordinate outfits for the beach dinner," Vanessa suggested to the female relatives. "I'm thinking white and gold theme." "Oh, that would be lovely against the sunset." Mom agreed enthusiastically. "Samantha always looked dreadful in white," Ryan commented offhandedly. "Washed out her complexion completely." Mom made a weak attempt at inclusion. "Perhaps next trip, Samantha could." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Ryan interrupted smoothly. "Family vacations are for people committed to the family unit." The implication hung in the air. My divorce had somehow made me less committed to family, less deserving of inclusion. Dad remained absorbed in a business conversation with Uncle Phil, completely ignoring the emotional undercurrents. The market's shifting toward sustainable investments. My portfolio's up 17% since making the switch. Uncle Phil nodded sagely. "Speaking of opportunities, Ryan, I've been meaning to discuss a position opening up in our Asia division." Someone with your talents could really shine there. I nearly choked on my water. I spoke fluent Mandarin and had extensive experience with Asian markets, something Uncle Phil knew perfectly well. The position he described matched my qualifications exactly, yet he was offering it to Ryan, who struggled with basic Spanish in college. The expensive wine flowed freely at the main table. 2 bottles became 4, then 6. With each glass, the conversation grew louder, the laughter more excessive, and the exclusionary tactics more blatant. During a brief lull, Vanessa reached into an oversized designer bag and pulled out several small gift boxes wrapped in signature blue paper. "A little something for the ladies," she announced, distributing them to Mom, Aunt Margaret, Emma, and even the Preston women. Each box contained a silver bracelet from a renowned jewelry designer. I recognized the distinctive clasp from advertisements. Exclamations of delight and hugs followed, with multiple photos taken of wrists adorned with their new treasures. No box came my way. No acknowledgement that I, too, was one of the ladies present. The message couldn't have been clearer. I wasn't just seated separately. I had been symbolically removed from the family entirely. I considered leaving. My purse sat ready beside my chair, Uber app accessible with a single tap. I could make an excuse, a headache, an early meeting tomorrow, and escape this orchestrated humiliation. But something kept me rooted to my uncomfortable fold-out chair. Perhaps pride, perhaps morbid curiosity about how far they would take this charade, or perhaps the growing realization that this dinner was forcing me to confront truths I'd spent decades avoiding. The final straw came unexpectedly. Ryan stood, glass raised, calling for attention. "I'd like to make a toast to family success," he announced. "As you all know, I've recently been promoted to Executive Vice President of Regional Operations." Applause erupted around the table. Dad beamed with unmistakable pride. "This dinner is my way of thanking those who've supported me on this journey," Ryan continued. "The people who matter most." My hands clenched into fists beneath my napkin. Ryan's promotion had come directly from my recommendation and mentorship. I'd spent countless hours helping him prepare for the interviews, editing his presentation, and personally calling the selection committee chair, my former graduate school classmate, to vouch for him. Now he stood, deliberately avoiding looking in my direction, erasing my contribution entirely. "To family," he concluded, raising his glass higher. "The only support system that truly counts." "To family," everyone echoed, crystal glasses clinking melodiously. From my trash-adjacent seat, I took a slow sip of my house red, a new clarity washing over me. This wasn't just one uncomfortable dinner. This was the crystallization of a lifetime pattern I'd tried desperately to ignore. I wasn't the problem. I never had been. As if reading my thoughts, Ryan's gaze finally found mine across the restaurant. His expression wasn't merely smug. There was something darker there, something almost desperate in his need to diminish me. In that moment, I realized Ryan wasn't acting from a position of strength. His elaborate humiliation campaign stemmed from profound insecurity. He needed me small because my success threatened the family narrative that had been carefully constructed around his mediocrity. This realization didn't heal the hurt, but it shifted something fundamental in my perception. The power dynamic wasn't what I'd believed it to be. As the dinner plates were cleared and dessert menus appeared, I noticed Michael glance toward the main table and then back at me with an expression of concern. Following his gaze, I saw the restaurant manager speaking quietly with Ryan, who was nodding with exaggerated importance. The bill was coming, and with it, my moment of reckoning. The exclusion continued seamlessly into the dessert course. Elaborate confections appeared at the main table, soufflés that required pre-ordering, tableside flambéed creations, and an assortment of petit fours on silver trays. Once again, no server approached my isolated station to take an order. I caught Michael's eye, and he gave me an apologetic shrug. "Your brother instructed us not to disturb you for dessert," he explained quietly. He mentioned something about dietary restrictions again. The fabricated dietary restrictions had become Ryan's subtle tool for controlling my experience, simultaneously positioning himself as considerate while actively restricting my participation. It was manipulation masked as thoughtfulness, a tactic I recognized from childhood when he would helpfully tell Mom I didn't want to attend family outings so he could have friends over instead. As the family indulged in their desserts, the conversation took an even more pointed turn. Aunt Margaret leaned conspiratorially toward the center of the table, her voice carrying just enough for me to hear. "Have you heard Thomas Peterson is dating again?" she asked, eyes glittering with malicious delight. "After that dreadful divorce." Thomas Peterson. My ex-husband's close friend. The strategic name drop was deliberate. "I heard his new girlfriend is absolutely lovely," Vanessa added, glancing sideways to ensure I was listening. "A pediatric surgeon with family money. Quite the catch." Speaking of Daniel, Uncle Phil chimed in, ran into him at the club last weekend. "Seems he's landed on his feet. New position at Goldman, beautiful condo downtown." Every word was calculated to twist the knife. Daniel hadn't landed on his feet. He'd been ordered by the court to make restitution for the money he'd stolen from our joint accounts. Any new position or condo had come at my expense. Mom, perhaps sensing they'd gone too far, attempted to change the subject. "Samantha's doing well too. Aren't you, dear? Telling me about some marketing campaign recently." Before I could respond, Ryan interjected. "Let's not bore everyone with shop talk. We all know Samantha's career has hit some setbacks." Another lie. My career was thriving despite my personal challenges. I'd recently been approached about a CMO position at a major corporation, a fact I'd shared with Mom in confidence, which she had evidently passed to Ryan. "It's not easy bouncing back from such public failure," Ryan continued, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "First the marriage, then the housing situation, now the career plateauing. Must be quite the adjustment after always being the successful one." Something in me snapped. Not in the emotional, tear-streaming way Ryan probably hoped for, but in a calm, crystalline moment of absolute clarity. This was never going to change. The dynamic was too entrenched, the patterns too established. My family, particularly Ryan, needed me to occupy the role of failure to maintain their self-perception. Any success I achieved would be minimized, any struggle magnified and weaponized. For years, I'd tried to earn their approval, their inclusion, their love. I'd diminished my accomplishments to make Ryan comfortable, tolerated barbed comments disguised as teasing, and accepted systematic exclusion as the price of family connection. Looking around at their smug, wine-flushed faces, I finally asked myself, why? Why was I fighting for scraps of affection from people who fundamentally didn't value me? Why was I allowing myself to be humiliated by those who should have celebrated my resilience? The restaurant's ambient noise seemed to fade as this new awareness settled over me. I sat straighter in my fold-out chair, something shifting in my posture that must have been visible because Michael glanced at me with newfound respect. "Would you like coffee, ma'am?" he asked, the first time all evening someone had offered me something without qualification or limitation. "Yes," I replied, my voice steadier than it had been all night. "A double espresso, please." Ryan noticed this small act of self-determination. His eyes narrowed slightly as he watched Michael hurry to fulfill my request. For the first time that evening, I held my brother's gaze without flinching, without the reflexive smile I'd worn as armor. Just then, the restaurant manager approached the main table with a leather folio. "The bill," as requested, he announced with a deferential bow. Ryan accepted it with exaggerated casualness, flipping it open while continuing his conversation with Uncle Phil. Then he paused, his easy smile faltering. "There must be some mistake," he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. The manager leaned closer, pointing discreetly at the folio's contents. "No mistake, sir. 6 bottles of Chateau Margaux 2010, 2 seafood towers, for tomahawk steaks with supplement charges for the truffle butter and foie gras additions, the Dover sole with tableside service, and the various dessert specialties. Plus the 20% gratuity for parties of 8 or more. Ryan's face paled slightly as he studied the numbers. I couldn't see the total from my position, but his reaction told me everything I needed to know. $2,900, he muttered, just audible from where I sat. A momentary hush fell over the table. Even with their comfortable finances, this was clearly more than they'd anticipated. Dad frowned, reaching for his reading glasses to examine the bill himself. Well, Ryan recovered quickly, his voice regaining its confident tone. Special occasions warrant special experiences. We'll split it evenly as family. He calculated quickly. About $240 per person, give or take. Perfectly reasonable for an evening like this. The family members nodded in agreement, reaching for wallets and purses. Dad was already removing his premium credit card, ready to cover his and Mom's portion. Then Ryan looked directly at me for only the second time that evening. Samantha, that includes you, of course. The waiter who had been hovering near the main table turned toward me, waiting for my response. This was the moment Ryan had been building toward, forcing me to pay an equal share for a meal from which I'd been systematically excluded. The final humiliation. I took a sip of my espresso, savoring its bitter warmth. Then I placed the cup down gently and looked Ryan directly in the eyes. Not my table, I said, my voice clear and steady. The silence that followed was absolute. Excuse me. Ryan's voice cracked slightly, his composure slipping for the first time that evening. Not my table, I repeated calmly. I wasn't seated at the family table, as you so clearly pointed out. I didn't consume the Chateau Margaux. I didn't partake in the seafood towers or special desserts. I had a beet salad, chicken, and this espresso. I placed a $50 bill on my small table. This more than covers my actual consumption, including a generous tip for Michael. Ryan's face flushed deep red. That's not how this works, Samantha. We're splitting the bill evenly. That's what family does. Family? I raised an eyebrow. You made it explicitly clear that I'm not part of this family tonight. Your exact words were, "This table is for family only," when you pointed me toward this fold-out chair by the trash can. The other diners at nearby tables were now openly watching our exchange. One elderly woman at the next table gave me a subtle nod of approval. You're being ridiculous, Ryan sputtered. It was just a seating arrangement. Was it? I stood, gathering my purse. Was it also just a seating arrangement when you instructed the staff not to serve me wine? Or when you ordered food for me without asking? Or when Vanessa distributed gifts to every woman except me? Or perhaps when you made that toast to family support after I personally recommended you for the promotion you're celebrating? Mom interjected, her voice high with anxiety. Samantha, please don't make a scene. I'm not making a scene, Mom. I'm establishing a boundary. There's a difference. Dad finally looked up from the bill, his expression thunderous. Young lady, you will contribute your fair share to this dinner. No, Dad, I won't. My voice remained steady. I've contributed my fair share to this family for decades, emotional labor, career assistance, financial advice, endless tolerance for disrespect, all while receiving nothing but criticism and exclusion in return. That ends tonight. Uncle Phil shifted uncomfortably. Now, Samantha, family is family. We have our differences, but at the end of the day, I interrupted, family should be the people who support you, not the ones who orchestrate your humiliation for sport. Ryan's expression hardened. This is about the divorce, isn't it? You're projecting your failures onto us because you can't accept responsibility for your own poor choices. My poor choices? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Like choosing to believe my family might actually celebrate my successes instead of resenting them? Or choosing to recommend you for a position you weren't qualified for because I genuinely wanted to see you succeed. I turned to face the entire table. Let me be very clear. I am not responsible for the bill at a table I wasn't allowed to sit at. I am not obligated to subsidize a celebration from which I was deliberately excluded. And I am no longer willing to accept treatment that I wouldn't tolerate from anyone else simply because we shared DNA. The restaurant manager, sensing the tension, approached cautiously. Is there a problem with the bill? No problem at all, I replied before anyone else could speak. I've paid for my meal separately. The family table will handle their own expenses. Ryan stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You don't walk away from family, Samantha. I'm not walking away from family, Ryan. I'm walking away from toxicity. There's a difference. I turned to leave, then paused, addressing the table one final time. For what it's worth, I genuinely hope you all find whatever validation you're seeking. It must be exhausting to need someone else's failure to feel successful. With that, I walked toward the exit, back straight, head high. Behind me, I could hear the panicked shuffling of credit cards, Mom's nervous attempts to smooth things over, and Ryan's increasingly agitated protests. Michael caught up with me near the coat check. That was the most impressive thing I've witnessed in 3 years of working here, he whispered, pressing a business card into my hand. My sister runs a networking group for professional women. You should come to their next event. I thanked him, tucking the card into my purse. It was a small gesture, but it represented exactly what I'd been missing: genuine connection and support rather than obligation and judgment. In the elevator, the same white-gloved attendant observed my expression. Better evening than expected, ma'am? Much better, I confirmed with my first genuine smile of the night. Outside, the night air felt cleansing, filled with possibility rather than regret. I had just ordered an Uber when I heard Mom's voice behind me. Samantha, wait. She hurried toward me, her heels clicking frantically against the pavement, designer shawl clutched around her shoulders. What you did in there was completely inappropriate, she began, voice quivering with a mixture of anger and distress. Your father is furious. Ryan is embarrassed. The whole family is mortified. And how do you think I felt sitting by the trash can while everyone pretended it was normal? I countered. How do you think I've felt for years, Mom, watching you and Dad celebrate Ryan's mediocrity while dismissing my achievements? That's not fair. We've always supported you. No, you tolerated me. There's a difference. I sighed, suddenly exhausted by the decades of this same conversation. I don't expect you to understand or agree with my perspective. I'm not even asking you to. I'm simply establishing what I will and won't accept going forward. Mom's expression crumpled. So you're abandoning us? Over one dinner. This wasn't one dinner, Mom. This was the culmination of a lifetime of being treated as less than. And I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm prioritizing my own well-being, finally. My Uber pulled up to the curb, its headlights illuminating Mom's distressed face. For a moment, I saw something I'd never noticed before: fear. Not of losing me, but of what my independence might mean for the family dynamic she'd helped construct. We're still your family, she said, almost pleadingly. Yes, you are, I agreed, opening the car door. But that doesn't entitle you to my dignity. As we drove away, I watched Mom's diminishing figure in the rear window, standing alone beneath the restaurant's elegant entrance marquee. Despite everything, a pang of sadness squeezed my heart. Not regret, I was certain of my actions, but grief for the relationship we might have had in a different reality. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Tough night? Actually, I replied, surprising myself with the truth of my words. I think it was exactly the night I needed. The aftermath was predictably chaotic. Within hours, my phone buzzed with messages ranging from Dad's cold fury to Aunt Margaret's passive-aggressive concern. Ryan didn't contact me directly, but Vanessa sent a scathing paragraph about my mental instability and embarrassing behavior. I read each message once, then muted the conversation threads. For the first time in my adult life, I felt no compulsion to defend myself, to explain, to smooth things over. The relief was enormous, like putting down a heavy backpack I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it wasn't part of my body. Mom called daily for a week, her messages evolving from angry demands to tearful pleas to resigned updates about family members I hadn't asked about. I returned her calls when I felt emotionally equipped to do so, keeping conversations brief but not unkind. "I don't understand why you're punishing us," she said during one call. "I'm not punishing anyone, Mom. I'm protecting myself." "From your family?" "We're not monsters, Samantha." "No, you're not monsters. You're people who've consistently prioritized Ryan's comfort over my basic dignity. That doesn't make you evil, it makes you human. But it also doesn't obligate me to keep accepting it." These conversations never resolved anything, but they established a new pattern, one where I spoke my truth without apology or expectation of understanding. Dad's approach was different. After 2 weeks of silence, he sent an email with the subject line, "Financial concerns." Inside was a spreadsheet detailing every expense my parents had covered throughout my life: college application fees, my first car insurance, a loan during graduate school that I'd repaid within a year. The final line read, "Family support works both ways. Your behavior at dinner was unacceptable and embarrassing. When you're ready to apologize appropriately, we can discuss moving forward." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say to someone who viewed parental support as a debt to be repaid with obedience. Ryan took a more public approach to his displeasure. He posted vague but pointed comments on social media about ungrateful people and the importance of family loyalty. Several relatives liked these posts, including Aunt Margaret and Uncle Phil. It was coordinated ostracism, designed to pressure me back into compliance. In the past, this tactic would have worked. I would have panicked at the thought of family members discussing me, judging me, united against me. This time, I felt only a calm certainty that I'd made the right decision. Instead of engaging with family drama, I redirected my energy toward building connections that nourished rather than depleted me. I joined the professional women's network Michael's sister ran, meeting accomplished women who celebrated each other's successes instead of resenting them. I reconnected with college friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage, people who remembered me before I'd started diminishing myself to make others comfortable. Most importantly, I began the process of rediscovering myself, my authentic preferences, opinions, and boundaries that had become blurred after years of contorting to fit my family's expectations. Work became a sanctuary rather than just an achievement to be dismissed by my family. Without the weight of seeking their approval, I found new creativity and confidence in my role. When the CMO position I'd mentioned to Mom officially opened, I applied without hesitation and advanced through 3 rounds of interviews. 6 months after the fateful dinner, I received an unexpected email from cousin Emma. The subject line was simple, long overdue. "I've wanted to reach out since that night at the Ivory Room," she wrote. "What Ryan did was cruel, and what's worse is that none of us spoke up." I've been thinking a lot about why I stayed silent. Fear of becoming the next target, probably. Comfort in the status quo. Maybe simple cowardice. None are good excuses. I'm sorry, Samantha. You deserved better from all of us, but especially from me. If you're open to it, I'd like to get coffee sometime. Not as family obligation, but as 2 adults who might actually like each other if given the chance. Her honesty was refreshing. We met the following week at a small cafe downtown, away from family haunts. The conversation was initially awkward, but gradually warmed as we discovered shared interests and compatible senses of humor that had never had space to emerge at family gatherings. "Ryan's been insufferable since that night," Emma confided. "It's like you broke some spell by standing up to him. Jake and I have started declining family events when we know he'll be holding court." "I never intended to cause a family rift," I admitted. Emma shook her head. "You didn't cause anything. You just stopped enabling a dynamic that was already toxic. There's a difference." That difference became my guiding principle as I navigated my new relationship with family. I didn't cut contact completely. That wasn't necessary or desirable for my healing, but I established firm boundaries around when and how I engaged. I declined the monthly family dinners, but sent birthday cards. I didn't attend the annual family vacation, but had lunch occasionally with Mom when she could meet without trying to broker peace with Ryan. I sent congratulatory messages for significant achievements, but didn't pretend slights hadn't occurred. The most surprising encounter came 7 months after the Ivory Room incident. I was leaving my office building when I spotted Ryan waiting beside the entrance, hands shoved in his coat pockets, expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "Samantha," he acknowledged stiffly. "Ryan," I replied, neither hostile nor welcoming. "What brings you here?" "I have a meeting nearby," he said, then corrected himself. "Actually, that's not true. I came to see you." We walked to a nearby coffee shop, maintaining a careful distance, as if approaching a truce on disputed territory. Once seated with our drinks, Ryan struggled visibly with whatever he'd come to say. "The promotion," he finally managed. "The one you recommended me for." "I'm failing." It wasn't what I'd expected. "I'm sorry to hear that." "No, you're not," he countered, but without hostility. "You predicted it might happen. You told me the role required stronger interpersonal skills than technical ones. I dismissed your advice." I sipped my coffee, waiting. "The point is," he continued, "I could use some guidance. Professional advice." I thought, given your experience. He couldn't quite bring himself to directly ask for help, but the implication was clear. Ryan needed me now. The power dynamic had shifted. In that moment, I had choices. I could refuse, letting him experience the consequences of his actions. I could help conditionally, extracting apologies or concessions. I could lord my position over him, as he had done to me countless times. Instead, I said simply, "I can recommend some books on leadership development that might help, and connect you with a colleague who specializes in executive coaching." Relief flashed across his face, followed quickly by confusion. "That's it? You're not going to, I don't know, gloat or something? What would be the point of that, Ryan? Your success or failure doesn't validate or invalidate my worth. That's the difference between us. I never needed you to fail to feel successful." He studied me with new eyes, perhaps seeing for the first time the person I'd become rather than the role I'd played in his narrative. We didn't reconcile that day. Decades of entrenched patterns don't dissolve in a single coffee meeting. But something shifted between us, a recognition, perhaps, that the old dynamic was permanently altered. As promised, I sent him the leadership resources and made the professional introduction. Whether he used them effectively was his responsibility, not mine. My worth was no longer tied to his perception or approval. The greatest lesson from the Ivory Room incident wasn't about family specifically, but about the liberation that comes from standing in your truth, even when, especially when, it contradicts the story others have written for you. I learned that real family, whether biological or chosen, is built on mutual respect, not obligation. That love without boundaries isn't love at all, but dependency. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is simply "not my table" when handed a bill you didn't accrue. Most importantly, I learned that creating your own place at the table of life is infinitely more fulfilling than accepting a fold-out chair by someone else's trash can. Today, as I sit in my new office with the CMO nameplate on the door, I no longer measure my success against my family's recognition of it. I celebrate my achievements with people who genuinely rejoice in them. I process my setbacks with those who offer support without condescension. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between keeping the peace and preserving your dignity? Between family expectations and your own well-being? If so, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Sometimes the most profound healing comes from knowing we're not alone in these difficult journeys. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share, not just to support this channel, but to reach others who might need to hear that it's okay to say, "not my table," to situations that diminish their worth. Thank you for listening, and remember, your place at the table of life should never come at the cost of your dignity.